Hello friends and welcome. Today I am going to deliver a lecture on role of extracellular matrix and mechanism of wound healing. Let us first try to have a look at the main objectives of today's deliberation. First, we shall try to get a general idea about extracellular matrix, followed by explaining the role of extracellular matrix in detail. We shall also try to understand the concept of wound repair and its types. After that, we shall try to learn in detail the mechanism of wound healing, and finally, we shall be discussing scar formation and fibrosis. Let us start with the extracellular matrix and its role. In biology, the extracellular matrix is a collection of extracellular molecules secreted by cells that provide structural and biochemical support to the surrounding cells. Because multicellularity evolved independently in different multicellular lineages, the composition of extracellular matrix varies between multicellular structures. However, cell adhesion, cell-to-cell communication and differentiation are common functions of the extracellular matrix. The animal extracellular matrix includes the interstitial matrix and the basement membrane. Interstitial matrix is present between the various animal cells, that is, in the intercellular spaces. Gels of polysaccharides and fibrous proteins fill the interstitial space and act as a compression buffer against the stress placed on the extracellular matrix. Basement membranes are sheet-like depositions of extracellular matrix on which various epithelial cells rest. Due to its diverse nature and composition, the extracellular matrix can serve many functions, such as providing support, segregating tissues from one another, and regulating intercellular communication. The extracellular matrix regulates a cell's dynamic behavior. In addition, it sequesters a wide range of cellular growth factors and acts as a local store for them. The stiffness and elasticity of the extracellular matrix has important implications in cell migration, gene expression, and differentiation. Cells actively sense extracellular matrix rigidity and migrate preferentially towards stiffer surfaces in a phenomenon called durotaxis. They also detect the elasticity and adjust their gene expression accordingly, which has increasingly become a subject of research because of its impact on differentiation and cancer progression. Components of the extracellular matrix are produced intracellularly by resident cells and secreted into the extracellular matrix via exocytosis. Once secreted, they then aggregate with the existing matrix. The extracellular matrix is composed of an interlocking mesh of fibrous proteins and glycosaminoglycans. For cells, extracellular matrix provides mechanical support, a biochemical barrier, and a medium for extracellular communication. Now, let us first discuss glycosaminoglycans. Glycosaminoglycans are carbohydrate polymers and are usually attached to extracellular matrix proteins to form proteoglycans, of which hyaluronic acid is a notable exception. Proteoglycans have a net negative charge that attracts positively charged sodium ions, which attracts water molecules via osmosis, keeping the extracellular matrix and resident cells hydrated. Proteoglycans may also help to trap and store growth factors within the extracellular matrix. Different types of proteoglycans found within the extracellular matrix are: number first is the heparin sulfate. Heparin sulfate is a linear polysaccharide found in all animal tissues. It occurs as a proteoglycan in which 2 or 3 heparin sulfate chains are attached in close proximity to cell surface or extracellular matrix proteins. It is in this form that heparin sulfate binds to a variety of protein ligands and regulates a wide variety of biological activities, including developmental processes, angiogenesis, blood coagulation, and tumor metastasis. Number second is the chondroitin sulfate. Chondroitin sulfates contribute to the tensile strength of cartilage, tendons, ligaments, and walls of the aorta. They have also been known to affect neuroplasticity. Number 3 is the keratin sulfate. Keratin sulfates have a variable sulfate content and unlike many other glycosaminoglycans do not contain uronic acid. They are present in the cornea, cartilage, bones and the horns of animals. Number 4 is the hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid is a polysaccharide consisting of alternating residues of D-glucuronuric acid and N-acetyl glycosamine, and unlike other glycosaminoglycans is not found as a proteoglycan. Hyaluronic acid in the extracellular space confers upon tissues the ability to resist compression by providing a counteracting turgor force by absorbing significant amounts of water. Hyaluronic acid is thus found in abundance in the extracellular matrix of load-bearing joints. Next are the fibers, in which number 1 is the collagen. Collagens are the most abundant proteins in the extracellular matrix. In fact, collagen is the most abundant protein in the human body and accounts for 90% of bone matrix protein content. Collagens are present in the extracellular matrix as fibrillar proteins and give structural support to resident cells. Disorders such as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, osteogenesis imperfecta, and epidermolysis bullosa are linked with genetic defects in collagen encoding genes. Number 2 is the elastin. Elastins, in contrast to collagens, give elasticity to tissues, allowing them to stretch when needed and then return to their original state. This is useful in blood vessels, the lungs, in skin and the ligamentum nuchae, and these tissues contain high amounts of elastins. Elastins are synthesized by fibroblasts and smooth muscle cells. Disorders such as cutis laxa and Williams syndrome are associated with deficient or absent elastin fibers in the extracellular matrix. Number 3 is the fibronectin. Fibronectins are glycoproteins that connect cells with collagen fibers in the extracellular matrix, allowing cells to move through the extracellular matrix. Fibronectins bind collagen and cell surface integrins, causing a reorganization of the cell cytoskeleton to facilitate cell movement. Fibronectins also help at the site of tissue injury by binding to platelets during blood clotting and facilitating cell movement to the affected area during wound healing. Number 4 is the laminin. Laminins are proteins found in the basal laminae of virtually all animals. Rather than forming collagen-like fibers, laminins form networks of web-like structures that resist tensile forces in the basal lamina. They also assist in cell adhesion. Coming to the mechanical properties of the extracellular matrix. Number 1 is the stiffness and elasticity. The extracellular matrix can exist in varying degrees of stiffness and elasticity. From soft brain tissues to hard bone tissues, the elasticity of the extracellular matrix can differ by several orders of magnitude. This property is primarily dependent on collagen and elastin concentration, and it has recently been shown to play an influential role in regulating numerous cell functions. Number 2 is the effect on gene expression. Different mechanical properties in extracellular matrix exert effects on both cell behavior and gene expression. Although the mechanism by which this is done has not been thoroughly explained, adhesion complexes and the actinomyosin cytoskeleton, whose contractile forces are transmitted through transcellular structures, are thought to play key roles in the yet to be discovered molecular pathways. Number 3 is the effect on differentiation. Extracellular matrix elasticity can direct cellular differentiation, the process by which a cell changes from one cell type to another. Number 4 is the durotaxis. Stiffness and elasticity also guide cell migration. This process is called durotaxis. The term was coined by Losium and colleagues when they discovered the tendency of single cells to migrate up rigidity gradients, that is, towards more stiff substrates, and has been extensively studied since. The molecular mechanisms behind durotaxis are thought to exist primarily in the focal adhesion, a large protein complex that acts as the primary site of contact between the cell and the extracellular matrix. Now, let us discuss cell adhesion to the extracellular matrix. Many cells bind to the components of the extracellular matrix. Cell adhesion can occur in two ways: by focal adhesions connecting the extracellular matrix to actin filaments of the cell, and hemidesmosomes connecting the extracellular matrix to intermediate filaments such as keratin. This cell to extracellular matrix adhesion is regulated by specific cell surface cellular adhesion molecules known as integrins. Integrins are cell surface proteins that bind cells to extracellular matrix structures such as fibronectin and laminin, and also to integrin proteins on the surface of other cells. Fibronectins bind to extracellular matrix macromolecules and facilitate their binding to transmembrane integrins. The attachment of fibronectin to the extracellular domain initiates intracellular signaling pathways as well as association with the cellular cytoskeleton via a set of adapter molecules such as actin. Coming to the next part of the topic, that is wound repair and its types and mechanism of wound healing. Wounds and skin damage is a key feature of both the dermal pharmaceutical and skin care products industries. The only difference between them is the level of damage. A wound occurs when the integrity of any tissue is compromised, for example, skin breaks, muscle tears, burns, or bone fractures. A wound may be caused as a result of a fall or a surgical procedure, or by an infectious disease, or by an underlying condition. Emergency personnel and first aid workers generally place acute wounds in following categories. Number first is the abrasions, also called scrapes. They occur when the skin is rubbed away by friction against another rough surface, for example, raw burns and skinned knees. Number second is the avulsions, which occur when an entire structure or part of it is forcibly pulled away, such as the loss of a permanent tooth or an earlobe. Animal bites may cause avulsions. Number third are the contusions, which are also called bruises and are the result of a forceful trauma that injures an internal structure without breaking the skin. Blows to the chest, abdomen, or head with a blunt instrument, for example, a football or a fist, can cause contusions. Number four are the crush wounds, which occur when a heavy object falls onto a person, splitting the skin and shattering or tearing underlying structures. Number fifth are the cuts, which are slicing wounds made with a sharp instrument, leaving even edges. They may be as minimal as a paper cut or as significant as a surgical incision. Number six is the fish hook wound, which is an injury caused by a fish hook becoming embedded in soft tissue. Number seven is the incised wound, which is any sharp cut in which the tissues are not severed, a clean cut caused by a keen cutting instrument. The wound may either be aseptic or infected depending on the circumstances. Number 8 are the lacerations, which are also called tears. These are separating wounds that produce ragged edges. They are produced by a tremendous force against the body, either from an internal source as in childbirth or from an external source like a punch. Number 9 is the open wound, which is a contusion in which the skin is also broken, such as gunshot, incised or lacerated wound. Number 10 is the penetrating wound, which is a wound in which the skin is broken and the agent causing wound enters subcutaneous tissues or a deep lying structure or cavity. For example, nails, splinters, spikes, etc. Number 11th are the punctures, which are deep narrow wounds produced by sharp objects such as nails, knives and broken glass. Coming to the mechanism of wound healing. The amalgam of coordinated events that constitute the process of wound healing is quite complex. The steps in the procession of wound healing include inflammation, the fibroblastic phase, scar maturation and wound contracture. Wound contracture is a process that occurs throughout the healing process, commencing in the fibroblastic stage. The inflammatory phase occurs immediately following the injury and lasts approximately 6 days. The fibroblastic phase occurs at the termination of the inflammatory phase and can last up to 4 weeks. Scar maturation begins at the 4th week and can last for years. An analogous system depicts the 4 phases as hemostasis, inflammation, granulation and remodeling in a continuous symbiotic process. Now, let us discuss the phases in detail. Number first is the initial phase, that is hemostasis. The initial injury results in an outflow of blood and lymphatic fluid. This is also the process during which the initial reparative coagulum is created. Both the intrinsic and extrinsic clotting mechanisms are activated. The intrinsic mechanism is enjoined from the thrombocytes and the extrinsic mechanism from the injured tissues. Following vasoconstriction, platelets adhere to damaged endothelium and discharge adenosine diphosphate, promoting thrombocyte clumping which dams the wound. With the short-lived vasoconstriction complete, the vessels dilate, allowing the influx of more thrombocytes and other blood cells. At this stage, one can think of the commencement of the inflammatory phase. Although some speak of a separate inflammatory phase, it commences during the hemostasis phase, again providing evidence of the overlapping nature of the healing compendium. These thrombocytes as well as the recruited white blood cells release numerous factors to ramp up the healing process. Alpha granules liberate platelet-derived growth factor, platelet factor 4 and transforming growth factor beta. The process of inflammation, collagen degradation and collagenesis, myoblastic creation from transformed fibroblasts, growth of new blood vessels and re-epithelialization have all commenced. These processes are mediated by a host of cytokines and growth factors. The interleukins strongly influence the inflammatory process. Fibrinogen is cleaved into fibrin and the framework for completion of the coagulation process is formed. Fibrin provides the structural support for cellular constituents of inflammation. This process starts immediately after the insult and may continue for a few days. Number second is the inflammation. As the hemostasis phase can be construed to consist of an early and a late phase, the early phase being bleeding and hemostasis and the late phase being coagulation, so is it also with inflammation. While the inflammatory phase commences during the hemostasis phase, the early component of the inflammatory phase is predominated by the influx of the polymorphonuclear leukocytes and the latter component predominated by monocytes. Within the first 68 hours, the next phase of the healing process in underway, polymorphonuclear leukocytes engorging the wound. Transforming growth factor beta facilitates polymorphonuclear leukocyte migration from surrounding blood vessels where they extrude themselves from these vessels. These cells cleanse the wound, clearing it of debris. The polymorphonuclear leukocytes attain their maximal numbers in 24 to 48 hours and commence their departure by hour 72. As the process continues, monocytes also exude from the vessels. These are termed macrophages once they leave the vessel. The macrophages continue the cleansing process and manufacture various growth factors during day 34. Many factors influencing the wound healing process are secreted by macrophages. These include transforming growth factors, cytokines and interleukin 1, tumor necrosis factor and platelet-derived growth factor. Coming to the third phase, that is the granulation or proliferation phase. This phase consists of different subphases. These subphases do not happen in discrete time frames but constitute an overall and ongoing process. The subphases are fibroplasia, matrix deposition, angiogenesis, and reepithelialization. In day 57, fibroblasts have migrated into the wound, laying down new collagen of the subtypes 1 and 3. Early in normal wound healing, type 3 collagen predominates but is later replaced by type 1 collagen. Tropocollagen is the precursor of all collagen types and is transformed within the cell's rough endoplasmic reticulum where proline and lysine are hydroxylated. Disulfide bonds are established allowing 3 tropocollagen strands to form a triple left-handed triple helix termed procollagen. As the procollagen is secreted into the extracellular space, peptidases in the cell wall cleave terminal peptide chains, creating true collagen fibrils. The wound is suffused with glycosaminoglycans and fibronectin produced by fibroblasts. These glycosaminoglycans include heparin sulfate, hyaluronic acid, chondroitin sulfate, and keratin sulfate. Proteoglycans are glycosaminoglycans that are bonded covalently to a protein core and contribute to matrix deposition. Angiogenesis is the product of parent vessel offshoots. The formation of new vasculature requires extracellular matrix and basement membrane degradation followed by migration, mitosis and maturation of endothelial cells. Basic fibroblast growth factor and vascular endothelial growth factor are believed to modulate angiogenesis. Reepithelialization occurs with the migration of cells from the periphery of the wound and annexal structures. This process commences with the spreading of cells within 24 hours. Division of peripheral cells occurs in the hours 48 to 72, resulting in a thin epithelial cell layer which bridges the wound. Epidermal growth factors are believed to play a key role in this aspect of wound healing. This succession of subphases can last up to 4 weeks in the clean and uncontaminated wound. Last is the remodeling or maturation phase. After the 3rd week, the wound undergoes constant alterations known as remodeling, which can last for years after the initial injury occurred. Collagen is degraded and deposited in an equilibrium producing fashion, resulting in no change in the amount of collagen present in the wound. The collagen deposition in normal wound healing reaches a peak by the 3rd week after the wound is created. Contraction of the wound is an ongoing process resulting in part from the proliferation of the specialized fibroblasts termed myofibroblasts, which resemble contractile smooth muscle cells. Wound contraction occurs to a great extent with secondary healing than with primary healing. Maximal tensile strength of the wound is achieved by the 12th week and the ultimate resultant scar has only 80% of the tensile strength of the original skin that it has replaced. Next is the scar formation. Scars are areas of fibrous tissues that replace normal skin after injury. A scar results from the biological process of wound repair in the skin and other tissues of the body. Thus, scarring is a natural part of the healing process. Scar tissue is never as strong as normal, uninjured skin. For the first 3 to 4 weeks after injury, the wound can easily be reopened by minimal trauma. By 6 weeks, the scar has attained approximately 50% of its final strength. During the next 12 months, the scar gradually increases its ability to withstand injury, but it never attains normal strength. The period of maximum collagen production, that is, the primary component of skin and scar tissue, is the first 4 to 6 weeks after a wound has closed. During this period, the scar may appear red and be slightly firm and raised. Over the next several months, changes in the rate of collagen production and degradation occur. Normal healing results in normal types and amounts of collagen in the area. On the surface, normal healing is illustrated by the fading of redness and softening of the scar. Scar tissue is composed of the same protein collagen as the tissue that it replaces, but the fiber composition of the protein is different. Instead of a random basket weave formation of the collagen fibers found in normal tissue, in fibrosis, the collagen cross-links and forms a pronounced alignment in a single direction. This collagen scar tissue alignment is usually of inferior functional quality to the normal collagen randomized alignment. Now, coming to the last part of today's lecture, which is fibrosis. The term fibrosis describes the development of fibrous connective tissue as a reparative response to injury or damage. Fibrosis may refer to the connective tissue deposition that occurs as a part of the normal healing or to the excess tissue deposition that occurs as a pathological process. When fibrosis occurs in response to injury, the term scarring is used, and if fibrosis arises from a single cell line, this is called a fibroma. Physiologically, fibrosis acts to deposit connective tissue which can obliterate the architecture and function of the underlying organ or tissue. Fibrosis is similar to the process of scarring in that both involve stimulated fibroblasts laying down connective tissue, including collagen and glycosaminoglycans. The process is initiated when immune cells such as macrophages release soluble factors that stimulate fibroblasts. The most well characterized profibrotic mediator is transforming growth factor beta, which is released by macrophages as well as any damaged tissue between surfaces called interstitium. Other soluble mediators of fibrosis include connective tissue growth factor, platelet derived growth factor, and interleukin 4. These initiate signal transduction pathways such as the AKT-mTOR and SMAD pathways that ultimately lead to the proliferation and activation of fibroblasts, which deposit extracellular matrix into the surrounding connective tissue. That's all about today's lecture. Hope you have understood it very well. Thank you very much and goodbye.